Well, hi everyone. We've reached that end point. Sorry, forgot my words. we've, re we've reached. I know it is a very good start. It's been a very long 10 weeks, but we're here. We're at the final, and joining us today, obviously, I have my wing commander, Kim Suleman. How are you, Kim?
I'm absolutely fine, thank you.
Very good. And then we're joined by the lovely Debra Drake, who was one of the finalists from last season. Sewing Bee, how are you, my love?
I'm good, thank you. I'm really excited to be chatting all things Sewing Bee today.
Ah, well, we'll go watch this space. We've got some very interesting questions coming away. And last but not least, my much older sister, Rula Lenska, is here.
I was going to give you a compliment, but I've decided to hold it back.
Oh, well, and last but not least, introducing my favourite, John Scott. How are you?
Older sister. I'm good, thank you. All the better for seeing you.
Oh. Well, so this obviously this week was the final of the Great British Sewing Bee, and obviously we are going to miss having our Sewing Bee Natters, but it's not going to end there. But just a few quick things. So Kim, who is the winner from last week's giveaway?
So last week's winner is Penny Mason. Penny has thoroughly enjoyed watching Sewing Bee and also the Sewing Bee Natters, and is going to really miss everything. And also Penny has been watching you, Alistair, because you have a number of, yes, closely on. So she's been watching you when you've done your skirt patterns, and she's got other bits and pieces from you. So Penny Mason, just send a private message and then we'll organise getting a lovely Vliseline bundle of sewing items that are related to dressmaking sent out to you.
Perfect. Now we're also running our last giveaway, which is going to obviously be some lovely products from Vliseline, but also we are giving away a House of Alistair hamper, which is one of our wicker hampers with lots of sewing goodies in, to the value of £80. Now what we want you to do is, obviously you guys like to comment after the show, which is fantastic and great, and we love all those, but we want to know what you would like us to demo and share with you guys. So I know that rather than us coming up with lots of ideas that you don't want to see, we'd rather know what you would like to see. So if you want to know how to do a French seam, or put in say like a zip in the 1940s way with a little overlap, or even just simple things like shanking a button on an overcoat, just put it in the comments below.
Brilliant. That's very generous, Alistair, thank you for that.
That's all right. Now Debra, now tell us a little bit about yourself, because you've got lots of sewing classes, haven't you, coming up?
Yes. Do you know, taking part in the Sewing Bee has absolutely changed my life. You know, it's I'd been in the corporate world, in corporate communications for 30 years, and I loved it, but I felt like I'd done with that world. And so it is a weird thing to apply to go on a reality show like the Sewing Bee. It's a weird thing to do, you know, to put yourself forward for. So I did it because I wanted to change in my life, and it kind of pushed it. And I got to the end, and my biggest wish was to open a sewing school. So I've got a local sewing school. People come from all over the UK to sew with us, and it's just been a dream come true. And I've got the Sewing Bee to thank for that, you know, because, you know, I love it.
Where is it?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. It's in Llandudno. I'm not going to ask you to repeat that. It's got a double L in it.
I'm from the north. I'm from up there. I know.
Oh. Fabulous. So it's right by the sea, and I'm above the Quilting Bee, which is a fabulous local haberdashery, and I'm upstairs. I've got the whole area upstairs, and yeah, we do everything from beginners to master classes for the more technical aspects. But there's nobody shouting time. There's nothing like that. People coming to moid you when you're trying to get something difficult done. It's just a wonderful way to spend your time, really, and I just feel so lucky.
And to contact
sorry, I'm just going to say, Kim, this is not great, is it? I keep forgetting to say how you find me. I'm on www.sewingwithstyle.co.uk, or you'll find me on Facebook and Instagram under Debra Sewing with Style. So it's all there.
Brilliant. And we'll put the links up there, Deborah. So if anybody
Thank
wants
you.
to contact you, then they can do. So that's great.
Yeah.
And
So,
John, you're going to be at Festival of Quilts, aren't you? Creating mayhem.
Absolutely, but only for two of the days. I'm only going for 2 days because I have to cover Sewing Street on the other 2 days. So I'm going to be there for the launch on Thursday, and then I'll be there again on Saturday on the Sewing Street stand.
Perfect. And you'll get your book via Amazon if we follow the link on John Scott's Sewing World, can't we?
You can, yeah.
Perfect. Well, that's going to be really cool.
So can I say that I've got a special announcement, because this weekend on Sunday, I'm actually joining Hobby Maker Family for 2 shows at 3 and 6, and I'm going to do some beginner sewing. But the biggie is I'm actually coming to Sewing Street. Never been there before, so I'm really excited. My first shows are on Monday, and I'm going to be doing all things Brother, Vliseline, and lots of fabric as well. So, and I'm at Festival of Quilts as well. I'm going to
So can I ask you, are you there as Kim? Because I've just read lots and lots of posts, because I said it on air then, I didn't know if it was a secret or not. But loads of people going, oh, because what's your company called? Sixpenny What's It? Are you coming as Sixpenny What's It?
So I closed Sixpenny Memories down just before Crate and Craft went into administration, or just as it was going into administration. So technically I am freelance, but I tend to marry the two up, because on Facebook, etc., I've still got Sixpenny Memories.
Oh,
So
that's, I just didn't want to put people right, because I thought you were coming as you know, Kim Suleman extraordinaire sort of thing, and I didn't know if you were coming as Sixpenny What's It.
Yeah, what I'm doing, John, is rather than going down the format that you've gone down with sewing machines and things, which has been exclusively a sewing machine show, I'm going to do it whereby we intermingle the demos and the products as well as the sewing machines. So the 2 shows will have the sewing machines all the way through. So it's slightly different format to what you normally. I like to be different.
No, exactly, and I think we all love that, because it'll be a change. It'll be something different for the people to watch as well, which is excellent.
Right. So I am really excited to be joining you. So I'll be annoying you in the future.
I'm off on Monday.
Oh, good. You've planned that, you see.
Yeah.
Kim's coming in, John's off.
And I don't have any big news at the moment, unfortunately, but I'll work on it.
Yes, you do that, Pet.
I'll work on it. You're all putting me in the shadows. But should we? Oh,
Literally.
Oh. What's happened?
Right. Before we came on, I said I've just found a really quiet place, because my main studio backs onto an evangelical church who've decided to throw the mother of all weddings today, and it's very loud. And now they're setting off fireworks. So hopefully that will be it. So anyway, so I'm stuck in Studio 3, right at the back. Very glamorous, but no, I didn't escape that. So I'm not being shot. The police haven't been called. We're all okay. So what did everybody think about this week? So obviously we've got 3 finalists. We had Mia, we had Tony, and we also had Asma, who I personally thought from the very beginning, I think she's going to make it right to the end. So what was everybody's initial thoughts? So I'll come to John first. What did you think?
Right, okay, I thought that it was obvious from day one that she was going to win. I thought, because she didn't make any huge mistakes at all. So you knew that because sometimes you think, well, that person's going to win. And then one week they have a really, really difficult week and it just goes horribly wrong and then got rid of, even though they could be the best sewer. I didn't think she'd have one of those weeks. So in my thoughts, I always thought that she was going to win. But I kind of was rooting for Mia, because I wanted kind of the youthful kind of going into it, kind of not blind-eyed, but you know what I mean? She was just loving every minute of it, wasn't she? Even though she made dreadful mistakes and things like that. But the one thing I will say, and this shows for anything sewing-wise, Asma's final dress, she'd obviously practiced it, rehearsed it, knew exactly what she was doing. She knew where the fabric was going to go, whereas the others kind of just went, oh, let's go for it. Because Mia's dress, the underneath dress, she should have known that the length of it, that it wouldn't have been too long to go down. But I did love her. I thought she was lovely.
And what did you think, Deborah?
I was nodding my head, so absolutely with all of that. I mean, you know, as you guys know, you know what you're getting with the briefs a few weeks beforehand. And in the room I'm in now, I was practicing and I actually had a stopwatch. So I knew the time it was going to take. You know, I made an origami dress in our series, and that was actually quite a technical dress to make. And I timed myself making every part of it, because you can't risk, because you've got that fine line of making something simple. You're going to finish it and you're going to finish it well, but not really impress the judges or wow anybody. Or you've got to take it that length further, but make sure you can make it in the time. And you could see with Asma's, I mean, I've watched it a couple of times, and I've actually watched that reveal quite a few times to figure out how she did it. And she rehearsed that. Good for her, because you cannot go into something like that without rehearsing, because millions are watching you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Kim, what did you think?
You know, this has been my favourite episode of all of them. I really was pleased that Asma had won, because exactly what you say, Deborah, she's a consummate professional, and you can't say that she had the time to do that, because she's worked all the way through, I assume. She has a really high-powered job, but she was very, very good. But I was really rooting for Mia, because she only started sewing because her mum ordered a sewing machine during COVID and couldn't make a dress. And so Mia took over. And in that very short space of time, she has practiced and she's just gone for it. And yes, she was the one that I thought had the least experience, potentially, and has so much to give and to grow. And I really think that she'll do well. I believe from the resume they do at the end that she has gone on to a college course. So
she's doing costumes. She's
doing the
costumes, which is where I started. Yeah.
Right. I think in the future we'll see her, and she just grew in confidence, didn't she?
Mm-hmm.
And Tony, I loved him. I loved the fact that he still turned up in his woolly hat and his shorts. He did his own thing. But again, it's down to what you've just said, Deborah, the practicing, which begs the question, because we've had different opinions. Obviously, Stuart Hillard we've had on, and he was on the first series, and they only did 4, so the pressure was slightly different. But he led us to believe then that it was quite a long lead-in time to know what you were actually doing on those episodes. Do you just get a week? Do you get 2 weeks, Deborah?
No, they give you a good chunk of time before you even get to the studio. So you practice the first 8 before you even go there. So there's 10 episodes, isn't there? And you don't get the semi-final and the final until you're halfway through. And I guess the reason for that is because they're much more expensive to produce and much more technical. But it's, there was I think it was a good month, but the risk in it all is you don't know who the other contestants are. You don't know how good they are and what aesthetic they've got. And I suffer terribly from imposter syndrome. And I just thought, oh my God, I don't know how I'm on this show, if I'm going to be any good. I'd had a terrible time in fashion college. I was basically, I don't know if it was the same for you, Alistair, but they basically tell you you're hopeless the whole way through in the way to try and build your resilience. Whereas it, in fact, for me, I believed them. So I never even tried for a job in fashion at the end of my time in college. And I went down, like I said, the corporate route, and I did okay in that. And I only started getting back into sewing the last 10 years when the Sewing Bee came on, actually. But God, my mind is wandering again. I've got this peri brain, So yeah, you do know a good chunk of time beforehand. You have a few days in between filming. So if you've got any ounce of sense, you're practicing. But I think what's tougher for this lot is I think they went home in between. We were lucky in that we stayed there the whole time. So you could immerse yourself into it. And, I was listening to last week's episode of the Natter, and we did have the machines in the room when we were there. And my God, did I put that machine through its paces to make sure that I knew what it did.
Right.
Were you there did you stay there because it was during COVID time and you had to stay in a bubble? Is that why you stayed there? But
Exactly.
I'm confused. So you know what the first thing, so when Esme comes with the patterns, you know what's coming up?
No.
I was going to say, so it's only the final one that you can
only the made to measures. Yeah.
I was going to say.
Nothing else. No. They, you know, they run a tight ship. It's very, very well done. You're looked after incredibly well. But, you know, gosh, what I want people to take away from my experience is being on it is half the difficulty. It's the time afterwards where you're being critiqued by the public. That's tough. Believe me, it is tough. And, you know, because you think you've done the best, and then somebody from somewhere's got an opinion about you, and it's a tough one, you know, it's tough to put yourself out there. So this lot, I think, were fantastic. I think they were engaging. A lot of them, or if not all, were really talented. And the final three, I mean, Asma was technically brilliant. You could see that. Mia, amazing creativity. And Tony is the essence of sewing, somebody getting into a hobby and just really sticking to his own point of view throughout. And I loved that about him.
Yeah.
I've got a quick question for you, Deborah, which actually I've just thought about. And it's something that you mentioned about fashion college, because I went to Central St Martin's, and there was a lot of students who had a lot of money there. And they could afford technicians and machinists. And I mean, I studied with Stefan Renault. Now, we never ever saw him until Critique Day, and he had a townhouse in Chelsea with a chauffeur and a butler and a chef. So God knows what else he had. But my question is, with the Sewing Bee, do you guys get given a budget for the fabrics that you buy for your made to measure, so that it's an even sort of playing field, that rather than somebody who's got talent who comes on and only can visit their local market because of restrictions, do you get a budget?
Alistair, this is such a good question. And I've not been asked it many times. You know, people do ask it, but I think a handful of times I've been asked this one. The main question I get is, do you keep in touch with all the rest of the bees? You know, that's the first one. But no, incredibly, Becky was our sewing producer for our year, and she was on last week. A fabulous person, incredibly kind to me and the rest of the gang. And I remember one time when I was it was Bowie week, and I was making this brocade 2-piece with feather trim around the collar. And I really wanted more of the feather trim, but I'd gone to the UK business. I'm sorry, that there is a UK business that sells ostrich feather for the dance community. And they keep to sustainable fabric. And I wanted to buy more of it. And the budget was £100. And I asked Becky, can I buy some more with my own money? And she came back, she said, Deb, I'd love to allow you to do this, but it wouldn't make it a level playing field if you were spending more on something. And not that I would do that normally, it's just I wanted more of this stuff. And so we weren't allowed to. And, you know, on reflection, it's the right thing for the reason you just mentioned, Alistair.
I think that's that.
However,
no. It just suddenly dawned on me. I thought when I was looking out, I was thinking, actually, I hope that, you know, just so that, for instance, if there is somebody out there who's wanting to give it a go, who's got a financial pressure where they think, oh, I can't, it's not for me because I can't afford it. I'm always a big advocate in, you know, making sure that, you know, everybody. I mean, my mum, when I was little, if we had one apple, then a knife went through it and you and your friend shared it. You know, that was the kind of thing. So that's really interesting. Sorry, it suddenly came into my head, and I thought, oh, I wonder if I do that.
So
absolutely do.
Anybody in the future who's wanting to apply for the show, don't be put off by what you perceive to be a financial restraint. That's great. Thank you for that, Deborah. That's brilliant. Good insight. So on the first pattern challenge that they had, the Victoria dress, what did you think of it, particularly the choice of fabrics that I knew you were going to say something. So Tony and Asma actually picked the same fabric, just in different colours, and Mia picked a completely different one. Alistair, do you want to start with that?
Right. So obviously, when you look at the dummy sample, it was so tight on that dummy, and if that is a produced size 12 that has all the tolerances and everything like that on it, that there was no way that was the sample. But my biggest thing that I put down here was when Patrick was critiquing Tony's, and he was sort of going like this, and he was saying, what was it? He said, I would have preferred you to put in more net to make it plumper. And I'm thinking, have you read the pattern, Patrick? Because it'll have told you to put X amount in there. So how can you critique him for that? Sorry, that was my bugbear of that challenge.
John, what did you think of that particular challenge?
Okay, I thought the sample, the one that was already made, was atrocious. The darts weren't done properly. It was just awful. And I don't think they'd picked the right fabric either for the sample one, because it showed every kind of lump and bump. But the gold and the silver one, I think that comes with experience, because I think if I was at that point in my career, I would have picked that gold and silver fabric. But now, with all the hundreds of years that I've been making ball gowns and everything, I know full well that I wouldn't go anywhere near that fabric to make a frock with. And I also didn't understand why all the edges were, well, they kept calling it baby lock, didn't they? But why were the edges overlocked? You don't, if you're making a posh dress for somebody to go to a party, you don't put overlocking around the edge.
That's caused a huge furore on the internet. Baby lock. So Baby Lock is actually a brand name.
I thought so.
And then I fell off my chair when they said Baby Lock, because it's the BBC and everything is normally covered up. In fact, everything is covered up. To say it's a Baby Lock edge, I think what he meant was to do a fine overlock edge. So one thread, because in an overlocker, just to explain to people, you have your lower looper and your upper looper. I always think it sounds like Willy Wonka this. And then you have your two needles. So they could have used just the one needle and done a fine overlock. And I think that's what they were meaning. But they kept referring to it as a Baby Lock edge. And I must have had about 20 emails. What's this? What's a Baby Lock edge? So Baby Lock and Brother are two of the overlockers that you can get out there, and it's a Baby Lock. Forget it. There's no such thing as a Baby Lock edge. Yes, it's definitely they're through chaos, but I'm with you. Yes. So Deborah, what did you think?
You know, I was looking at it because it's basically based on The Vampire's Wife, isn't it, that dress? And it's been around for a while, and it is I like the style of it. But what they do is, and I mean, they did it when I was there as well, they put out fabric that if you're a micropile like me, you're attracted to, but it's not going to sew well. And if you don't know that, you're going to pick it, aren't you? You know, because Jill last year, when we were doing Parkers, Christian and I went for an army looking, what do you call it? You know, when it's all army camouflage, yeah. Poor Jill, when she started sewing with it, it was bouncing. And I remember Christian and I just going, dodge the bullet, you know, because until you start sewing, I mean, unless you're experienced like you guys, you don't know that that's going to be hard to sew with. And so that hit those guys like a truck. But I do think they put them out knowing that some people are going to pick them, you know. Also thought some of the previous pattern challenges were more difficult. I just think there was a lot of techniques in that to do in that time. But I think Mia did exceptionally well with that fabric. She did pick the right fabric for that challenge. But my personal experience of it was the pattern challenges, they don't really give you much visuals. Right. And I learned through pictures, really. I like to see what I'm making, or maybe the end result of it. You know, like on a normal pattern where you see the different points at different stages of construction. And I really struggled when I was doing it to try and understand what they meant with some of the English they'd written down. And also the distractions. You know, I know you've heard this before. It is relentless, the distractions when you're trying to understand a sentence that feels like Japanese to you. So I think they all did incredibly well. And I from a distance, I liked all three, but Mia was the right champion of that one, I think.
Yeah. Yes. Can you explain, Alistair, I don't know, you or John or Deborah, they had a different dart for people. So again, they were referring to different things. Was it the French dart?
Yeah.
And they were very pointy.
Well, yeah, but the end of it is only the same as a normal dart. It's only because it was shaped and went, instead of going that way or that way, it curved round to the bottom of the side seam. But the end of it should have still looked like, I don't like darts. If I'm drafting a pattern, I'll also always draft a seam rather than dart, because I hate a dart because it just stops. And if it doesn't stop in the right place, if it misses the point where it's supposed to be going, it immediately looks like a homemade dress. And in the fabrics that both the sample and all the other, oh no, not Mia's, because you couldn't see hers, but the other two, they were so obvious and they went to such a sharp point. And we don't know if they would have fitted a person, because, you know, it went onto a mannequin, didn't it? So we didn't know what it would be like when it had a proper boob in it, you know what I mean? But yeah, I thought they were too sharp.
Deborah, oh, sorry.
I know, on you go, Deborah.
Did you have anything to say?
No, it's just that French seam from the side of the bodice, isn't it? And yeah, I can't understand why you would have a pointed dart, you know, because the point of it is to make sure that it molds around the body, and that's not molding, is it? You know, it's literally pointing. And so yeah, I wasn't keen on that part of that design, but again, Mia's was sublime. I'd wear that myself. I thought it was beautiful.
I think the difficulty when you're using those types of darts, even if you're just using a bust dart, a lot of people, when they come to the end point, they backstitch. And what you should do is, before you've even pressed it, you should leave at least 5 inches of thread and not backstitch. And then you press it very lightly and let the dart tip disappear, and then very lightly then tie the point onto what you've just pressed, because what you'll find is you'll get a much neater, flatter thing. But when you're going up into such a sharp point and you backstitch it, it doesn't matter how much pressing you do, you're still going to get that, I call them like little pearly winks, you know, you get that little indentation. Pearly on your bust darts, there you go. So just look out, if you don't want pearly winks, then make sure you do that technique with the actual. But I think sometimes, I think this series, I think they've been trying to find the obscure to make themselves look all fanciful, because like John, whenever I'm drafting a pattern as well, if I can get rid of the darts, that's the first thing that I do, because essentially when you create a seam coming down over the bust line, some patterns have a dart coming down here to meet to the breast point, and some have another one coming up, and some even have 3 to create that shape. And you can actually get rid of all 3 by putting a line all the way over the bust, and then all the darts transfer their weight into that seam, and it's a much cleaner and much easier. And you can also shave it, so you get a really beautiful curve. And it also allows an actual natural breast inside to actually sit where it needs to, and that accommodates it.
I think it's important to add as well to what you guys have said, is to make sure they're pressed properly on a ham, you know, because at least then it creates that curve. Because I think when I've seen beginners, sometimes they just press that dart down and then you've gotten rid of the shape you've just created. So I didn't see any hams out there. I'm sure they had them. There's an edit, of course, but I think pressing it.
The two prim hams were there, the 2 different sizes.
Oh, were they?
Yeah,
okay.
Because I have a thing about spotting all the prim. They do have all prim haberdashery in there. And one of the things Mark Francis had said was that, particularly with the box of feet, he said he had all these things, but he didn't always know what they were for.
Same as Mark. I watched Mark. I really enjoyed hearing what he had to say, because it was very similar experience to us as well. Yeah.
So it's down to education. But yes, I could see the hams there, but it's a shame if you don't, you look at somebody like Mia who started in COVID, who's got no formal training whatsoever. How on earth she'll just think it could be an ornament? It could have been, something to hold something down.
A little sleep on,
Yeah, for a top.
You've got a break.
Going back to one of my most interesting weights, the dress weights, was Vicky. Did you see she was using tiles?
Yeah.
On the previous episodes, everybody else was using cute little, whether they'd made them themselves or whether they were bought, and she actually had tiles to hold her pattern pieces down. I thought, bad idea. You might rip your paper occasionally, but they're certainly not going to move.
No, but they're still doing this. They're still doing this with their rotary cutters.
They're using rotary cutters.
I know, but
I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of rotary cutters at all.
No.
The scissors, yeah, but they seem to be in thing, don't they?
But the other thing to what Kim you've just mentioned about the pattern weights. So, for instance, this is a real big bugbear of mine. Like, for instance, when you're actually using your pattern, you use the weights to keep the pattern in place whilst you chalk. Then you take everything off and then you cut.
Whereas
you don't leave all that weight on there, because that you're putting too much weight on the fabric, and when you're cutting, you're just going to distort. So I just wouldn't. And when I saw Mia on this challenge, when she had all those pattern weights and she was trying to cut, and I was thinking, but you're pulling it this way, it's going to fall back, but she did a really, really good job. I think also as well, it goes back to I'm a big advocate. Fabric is fabric at the end of the day, and then a sewer is the person, if you like the flowery version, is that they give it the heartbeat. So you take a flat piece of fabric and you turn it into something amazing. And it doesn't matter whether or not you've got, for instance, like viscose fabric. You can, as long as you use the right stabilizer or backing, you can turn that fabric into other fabric, which then you can use for bag making. So in this instance, I would have put a really lightweight stabilizer on the back of that gold and silver fabric, because they saw from taking the bolt off how frayed it was already. I mean, that should have set alarm bells off. I mean, I would have looked at that and gone, oh, I might just go and see if there's something else.
Yeah.
Deborah, once you've chosen that roll of fabric and you carry it over to the table, and say, for example, with Tony and Asman, you think, oh my God, this is a disaster. Are you allowed to take it back and go, I need something else, I'm going to choose something completely different?
Yeah, they're not unkind. I think that did happen. Yeah, they absolutely allow you to do that. But I suppose, as I keep saying, it's the time. You've only got so long, and panic sets in, because you're faced with something with like 15 pages of instructions, and it's all words, more or less.
Yeah.
And people are asking, so what do you think, Deborah? And I'm just like, it was really stressful. And so you haven't got that silence and time to think. So sometimes you've made that decision about fabric and you think, okay, I'm just going to carry on now.
Right.
Because you're panicking, and you make the wrong decisions, and you can go out on that, unfortunately.
Mm.
How do you cope with, I presume there's 2 or 3 camera crews in there, and you've got the presenter and obviously Esme and Patrick annoying you. How do you cope with that? Have you ever told them to go away, leave me alone? Because they love it if you have a crisis.
Well, I had a superpower in that I can speak another language, and so Welsh is my first language. So sometimes I used to swear to myself in Welsh. They had no idea what I was saying, so they didn't know I was in panic. Only until later, when they got a translator in, they thought, we missed out. She was having a meltdown. But yeah, you do have people around you at all times. But I was mindful, and the rest of the bees, when I was on our series, you're making a TV show, and you've got to realize that the audience at home need to understand what you're making. And I remember when I was on it, we did a 30s week and I cut the bias the wrong way. I'd cut one way and one the other. And there was a bias seam going across. It was the classic V&A bias cut dress I was making. And I remember standing there and I put my hands on the table and just thought, that's it. That is my mistake and I'm going to go home. Anyway, the story producer that was on my table with the sound person and the camera guy, I was almost in tears and I didn't want to cry on television. I was a professional working for a big blue chip, and I didn't want to come across as flaky, you know, even though I was a little bit, you know, you hide it, don't you? And I remember just thinking, please don't film me crying. And so what the story producer says, look, we're going to give you half an hour, but then you've got to explain what's gone wrong because people at home need to know what's happened. So they gave me that 30 minutes to collect myself and to carry on with what I was doing. And they did come back and I explained what I'd done wrong. So I feel like a lot of lessons have been learnt in reality telly, because even though this is a lovely reality television show, it is humans and we are members of the public that are on these shows, and we have gone back to our real lives afterwards. And there is a responsibility not to put us out there looking like idiots, you know, but we're human. And if we do make mistakes, it's our part as well to explain what went wrong.
But also, they're making a TV show, so they want drama, they want meltdowns, they want tears. And even though you don't want to upset the real people, if you watched every week and it was all lovely and flowery every week, you'd soon go, oh, this is boring. People like conflict, don't they? So I understand that they were nice to you, but they also need to make a story out of something.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I thought, if you remember the first episode we filmed, John, it was, I think the lady's name was Catherine. I really did think that the production value wise, I actually thought them filming her having that real panic attack, I thought was so distasteful. I thought they could have edited that in a very different way, and I just felt so sorry for her, because when you're in that position, you know, you're vulnerable, and I just think that very first one, but then as the series has gone on, obviously that was the only sort of like big thing that happened on that series, so they were going to make a big deal of it. But I just thought that it left I mean, I know you said it was sort of, you didn't like that either.
Yeah, no, not at all. But I also think that on shows like that, they can edit it. So if that went out as episode 1 and they got any complaints about, you know, kind of mindfulness and bullying or whatever, or the fact that they think that they could have edited things out later on. Because if you remember in Mark Francis' year, there was a boy that had a meltdown the week before, 2 weeks before Mark, and you saw the whole meltdown. Yeah. But when Mark had his meltdown, they let him go outside and you just heard him through his microphone sniffling. And then later on, he was back to his table, he was going, fine, and carried on. And I think that's a much better human way to do it than, like you say, filming stuff. Because I think sometimes if you and I make a dress in a workroom and everything, we still get those vulnerable moments. And we haven't got a TV camera, and you can get really yourself all sweaty and your hands going when you realise it's not actually going together properly. It's bad enough when you're just on your own. So if there's a story producer hassling you, then it's going to be 100, and it's not your job, like you're saying, and you know that people are going to be watching. There's all those things added onto it.
Yeah. So can we move on to the transformation challenge this week? Just pulled a face already. I didn't necessarily agree with the winner. I loved Tony's, because I get really confused that they give a brief at the beginning and then they seem to change a little bit. And when I looked at it, I loved the fact that Tony kept trying his trousers on. It just pleased me enormously. He was so happy with those trousers. He didn't try them on once. He did it several times. So it was a man's mannequin, yes, which was great. So obviously it's easier from a shaping point of view. But what did you think about it? He just pleased me enormously, Tony. He was so happy. So shall we start with John this time?
I hate the transformation thing. You all know that. I can't. It's nothing to do with sewing. It's a design job. It's not a sewing job. That's Great British design work. I just don't know how in 90 minutes they can be shown a rail or a bucket or something and have anything. I'd still be going, oh, what should I make at it? I wouldn't have thought and made. And it's a design challenge. It's not. And half of them are rubbish, aren't they? Half of them are like, you'd never ever do that. Do you know what I mean? And it's kind of a different challenge. I think it's fine if you want to do a mental arithmetic challenge like that, but it doesn't belong in Sewing Bee. I still think the transformation scene should be where they're all given the same piece of fabric, they're all given, and they're all told, go and make a French seam. And we learn how to make a French seam, and we see 9 or however many of them are left by that time. Or go and put this invisible zip in, and we all see how you do it. We're told how to do it properly, and then see how they do it and the mistakes they make. I think that would be far more valuable than take these like rubber gloves and make a dress out of it.
So, Deborah,
Well,
Deborah, what was your thoughts of the transformation? Obviously, you've lived
say,
through it.
John,
As well.
right, I was going to say, Kim, John should say how he feels and what he thinks. But, you know, I actually think you should patent that idea. I love what you just suggested. I think that would be marvelous. I hated the transformation challenge when I was on, and I really struggled with it because, like you, when I'm thinking of something to make, the part for me is as I'm going to sleep at night, I'm thinking, how am I going to put this thing together? Or even when I'm on a walk or anything. That is what's wonderful about our hobby. Well, your work and my work now, but was my hobby. It was just the best part of it. So the way I coped with it when I was on the show was I used to do sketches of clothes I liked, you know, different tops, different skirts, so that when I was presented with this rail of stuff, shall we say, I could think of that Rolodex in my head of shapes I liked and what I could construct. But I really struggled with them not being finished well and them being really crappily made, if I can say that. I really struggled. It was my weakest challenge, if I'm honest, and I really didn't like it. But for the challenge these guys did, I really wish they'd kept the trousers long. I felt that it was too much doing the trousers and the top. I loved Mia's. That was my favourite. I loved the colour combination that she put together, was just inspired. And I would have loved that with a nice pair of black trousers. And I thought it would look a wonderful on Harry Styles.
Yes.
I do agree with John. I absolutely hate the transformation challenge because I don't think it's, yes, fair enough, it could be taken as tongue-in-cheek, but it's a bit sort of like, it doesn't really account really to any sort of points towards whether or not you're going to leave or not, and everybody just takes it with a little bit of a pinch of salt, because at the end of the day, what can you do? I mean, I must admit, my favorite one out of all of them, I had to pick Asma's, just because I could clearly see what she had, but it wasn't the nature of the transformation challenge. Doesn't really have a box to sort of like tick. But I just thought, I think I had seen enough of Mia's technique in her using fabric to drape. I just think, yes, we've done that, but you've done that every single transformation, and I think sometimes you've got to show a different skill set, because if you're too samey all the time, or everything looks the same, then it doesn't show that you're a diverse, you know, sewer or designer, if you like, you know, at the end of the day. Because, for instance, clothes that I design for House of Alistair are very different when I'm taken on as a commercial designer for a big house. So I'm designing for that house, not for House of Alistair. So my skill set and brain works in a completely different way, and I have to fulfill their brief and what their brand identity is, and who essentially is their shopper. So yeah, I'd like to have seen a little bit more. I wasn't too keen on Tony's. I just thought it was a bit Mark Bolan, but not in a really good way.
I just like the fact that he kept putting the trousers on. I can see him walking down the street, if he's still a postman, with his trousers on, thrilled to bits. And do you know what it is? It made him happy, and that made me happy, I have to say. So we've touched on the final challenge. And obviously we know that final reveal dress. Like you, Deborah, I've watched it a couple of times just to see the way it swirled out. It was amazing. The one thing that did please me on that final challenge was I did see Tony, for the first time anybody has used an interfacing to support the zip that they were putting in. That is the very first time interfacing's been mentioned or talked about. And it's something, obviously, with me being involved with Vliseline, that it's such an important part of garment construction that you can't do without it. Deborah, what's your thoughts? You have interfacing on, because I know Vliseline supplied.
I cannot agree with you more, Kim. You know, that is one thing you do not skip on when you're dressmaking. It makes all the difference to what you make, is interfacing. But, you know, you have to ask for it in the same way Becky was saying on the Natter last week. They're not going to tell you to use it. You need to know that you need it. So that knowledge has to be there. So you send a full list of what you needed for that challenge. And I always used to ask for a good meter of that stuff, because, you know, it's integral to the design. I thought it was interesting how Patrick talked at the beginning of the challenge about Mia's vision, and that it had always been clear in her pattern challenges, and that Asma's hadn't always been clear. So I don't know what his view was of Asma's design point of view throughout. But you could see as she went on the show, she was getting stronger, and she honed down her designs, I think. And I just thought it was interesting that he said that right at the beginning of the pattern challenge. And I can't remember if he mentioned Tony at that point. He must have. He wouldn't have just mentioned it. It's just I've made notes here. But I thought for a final, a 2-in-1 dress, that is an incredibly difficult engineering feat to take off. And I think Asma's was, well, it was astounding, wasn't it? And it's taken me a while to figure out how she made it. I have now, but to have put the bulk in the top and not the bottom, fabulous. I thought my hat got taken off for her. I thought she was fantastic.
What did you think, John?
I agree. I thought that was by far was the best, and a kind of the only one really that filled the brief properly, because Tony's just was the skirt, wasn't it? The daughter just wiggled, and I liked it, but he didn't. It looked like the same top with a longer skirt on it, so it wasn't really filling the brief. And I just thought that Mia's was a bit kind of like gung-ho sort of thing. But Asma, obviously, like we said right at the beginning, I don't know if it's because she's a surgeon and she knows how things go together and everything like that, but she'd obviously sat down, and maybe when she was going to sleep, like you, Deborah, was going, now how am I going to get? And one night she'll have been lying in bed thinking, oh, I know how to do it. I wrap it there, and I bet you any money that friend had practiced in one at home, because she knew exactly.
Oh, yeah.
When she'd unraveled that, she knew exactly what to do, didn't she? But that's what made, I mean, Asma's going to win anyway, but that's what made that so astounding. And like you two, I've watched it over and over again. But you see, that's the kind of thing I would have learned working in theatre, when they're like, oh, Cinderella needs to be in this dress, and by the time she's walked by the side, she needs to be in a ball gown. And you create those things, but it takes a technical drawing mind to work it out. It's obviously a dressmaking thing, but it's not just a dressmaking thing. It's a dressmaking thing now. Where do I put the weight? Where do I put the bulk? How do I make it so it doesn't? Because most of the time, people would have put it here and she'd have looked like a Teletubby or whatever. But the fact that it was, and she chosen her fabrics well, hadn't she? So that one that was the second dress made out of was beautiful, but it wasn't heavy. So it didn't take up too much space, and then draped really beautifully when it was there.
Yeah.
Did you notice as well that what I liked about Asma's as well is that it looked like day wear changing into nightwear, whereas the other two were both nightwear.
Yes. Yeah.
So I thought it looked like a true transformation of somebody been to the office and then thought, right, I'm going to go out for a posh dinner. And the twirl that happened was just incredible.
Yeah, it was amazing. What did you think, Alistair?
Well, I thought hands down Asma's was the best. I thought she didn't just go and use black, which the other two used, and then they used a stronger color. I wasn't too keen on Tony's, just because I don't really like his aesthetic in terms of the fabrics that he sometimes chooses, but that's a personal thing. I think he's done very, very well. It is a real feat to get something to do that. For instance, there's a lot of quick change artists that use this technique, and they have to go to specialist costumiers to actually have these done, because to do them right, and the trick with all is to get the right fabric. A lot of drag queens now, if anyone watches RuPaul's Drag Race, there's always, you know, a reveal. You know, well, John, I'm sure after this you'll tune in.
Yeah.
But there's always a reveal. But if anybody wants to see a very, very, very clever gentleman, this gentleman's name is called Hussein Shulayan.
Oh.
And now he's a big fashion designer, and he was a St. Martin's boy as well. Now, he did this entire, so I actually, when I way back when I was a student, but this whole collection is held at I know,
when the world was in black and white, you mean?
Well, it is. Well, at least I wasn't in sepia. But
go on.
But literally, so I actually was in the audience for this show, and you were staring at a stage, and it had an armchair, and it had a coffee table, and it had a sofa, and you thought, oh, this is going to be one of these really hip sort of, like, you know, a bland catwalk show where the models are just sitting and posing and there's no music. Anyway, this music started happening, and then these models came on, and thought, where's, you know, they're not wearing anything. So then one of them took the middle of the coffee table out and placed it on as a hat. Then she climbed into the coffee table, and it was made out of really fine wood, and she pulled it all up, and that became the bodice. And then there were like objects which were like a big wicker sculpture that a model just like a snail just sort of encapsulated herself, and that became this beautiful gown. And then the other models were taking parts of the sofa off, and they were placing the pads in certain places, and then they stripped the whole sofa. By the end of it, the entire stage was clean, even the rug. So the whole thing had been made up by that. And if I don't even know if it's on YouTube, but the gentleman's name is Hussein Shalayan, and that was one of his first debut collections out of St. Martin's, and it was absolutely stunning. And if you ever get the chance to go into the Victoria and Albert's archive, which literally is just full, he bequeathed that entire collection. It was such a clever collection. I've never seen any fashion designer do something like that again. So that's my little insight. But it was I couldn't, when you started seeing what was happening, and you just thought, my goodness, you know, they were just like, it was just like IKEA, but, you know, pret-a-porter.
Deborah, a question to ask is, having survived the Sewing Bee, and you were obviously on for the full 10 weeks, would you recommend anybody going onto the Sewing Bee, or would you just say stay away?
Okay, so I get asked these questions, in that somebody said to me last week, would you do it again? And I actually say no, because it was so hard. So hard. You don't know what it's going to take out of you physically, mentally, emotionally. And, you know, then afterwards, the social media is tough. You know, even if you're resilient, it's tough. Do I regret taking part? Not at all, because it was an amazing experience. So I think if you're up for a bit of fun, and you know, yeah, I would do it. If you're that way inclined and you want to have a really big challenge, have a go. But, you know, I do get anxiety that I'm still there. I mean, I get them every week where I'm back there. I've lost my fabric. The judges are mean to me. You know, and because it is that stressful, and I had quite a stressful job, you know, before going on it, so I can take stress, but it was hard, you know, it is hard, and you don't see the edit until it comes out. And so what was wonderful for me when I was on it was I hadn't realized that I was up for as a contender for Garment of the Week a few times as well, even though I had won 3, dropping that in. I was contender for a few more times as well, which I didn't know until the programme came out. So, you know, that regret of not doing anything after college was a real validation for me. So it gave me what I needed. So, yeah, it depends what your reasons are for going on it. I mean, for me, I think, you know, wow, what a beginning of a career in costuming, and to have done the Sewing Bee and got to the end and then is now starting her career. I think it's fabulous, honestly.
It'll stand her in good stead for resilience, if nothing else, won't it? One thing I have to say is I know, Deborah, that you have not appeared on any or very many other places. So it's a huge privilege for you to join us today. It really is.
There's a reason for that, Kim. I mean, I don't really do this kind of thing, but I've watched these natters and I've liked how constructive they are. And so for me, it was a pleasure to be asked and a privilege to be on. So I'm, you know, it's great. I could talk about Sewing Bee all day long. So yeah, I am quite private that way, but no, it's I wish they had a show like this afterwards. You know, I think people would enjoy it. I know it's been talked about, but you know, it'd be brilliant, wouldn't it, to have something on BBC Two?
One thing I found, you know, you talk about social media, there is a Great British Sewing Bee group. It's not obviously the contestants. However, it has just come out last week after the final that Tony's wife and Mia's mum had joined this group. So they've actually, from the beginning, so they've actually been aware of all of the things that have been said. And I was always brought up that if there's something, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. It goes back to Thumper, doesn't it, in the Disney films? And I really do think that's true, because you don't know on the edits of these shows what has gone on, because we're only seeing it's less than an hour, because if you deduct the time that the presenter prattles on and all of the other bits and pieces, it's considerably less. It's probably only about 35 to 40 minutes of actual sewing time. So yes, I found that really interesting. They actually came out on after the Sewing Bee onto this social media group to say, hi, I'm Tony's wife, and hi, I'm Mia's mum. So hopefully that'll make people think twice, particularly in that group, about what they say and who they say to, because you never know who's listening.
But sadly, we all know from being on telly that some people get joy out of writing, and they know full well they can go on the Same Street fan page or Alistair's fan page or anything and write whatever they fancy. And I think some people enjoy, I mean, 99% of them are lovely and positive and fabulous, and I love all that, but every now and then you can get somebody and you just think, why have you even written, and not just about me, about anybody within the industry or the community, but you just kind of think, what makes you sit there and write that? Because you wouldn't say it to their face. They'd never walk up to somebody and say it to their face. And that's one of the downfalls of all of this, isn't it? That people can just sit there anonymously and say what they like about who they like, and they don't realise how much it can. I mean, we're old seasoned and I still get upset by it. So how somebody like Mia is going to cope seeing, or Mia's mum even seeing something. I don't know that group, so I don't know what was said, but it would cut me. It would slash me to the heart if I saw a friend or a family member being slagged off for doing something they love. It's not even like they're in the news for doing something nasty. They're doing something that they love doing. So let them get on and do it and have joy in it. Don't bring nastiness into the world.
No, you're quite right, because I think we've all been at the end of it. And the thing is that I've always said to my family and friends, they get quite upset about it all. And I've had to stop a certain family member sort of trying to retaliate. And I said, leave it. The biggest thing you can do is leave the post there for people to see and it will show the person up for being the person that they actually are. I mean, you know, I know that I've put on weight since I started TV, and you know, but I tell you what, in fact, actually,
honestly, that
I'll give you a laugh, right? So I have a customer. Hi, Elsie Morehouse. Now, Elsie is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful lady, and she rings me up to place her orders and stuff. And we were just having this natter. Now, I know that Elsie will laugh at this if she's watching. And I said, "Oh, yes." I said, I think I need to go on a bit of a diet. She says, "Oh, yes, no, I thought you were looking a bit porky."
But they're saying that out of love. They're not saying that's not a nasty one. I can take those ones. It's when somebody goes on and says,
but that's Elsie talking, to you, isn't she? Not behind the screen, and you know, that's a very different thing. I wanted to bring something positive up as well about because that is something I could go on for this subject for hours, because I really hate it. I think we've all got a responsibility on how we behave online. I genuinely do. And, you know, we were members of the public, as this lot were, and it's horrendous to hear somebody mocking your accent, or they don't like your nose or whatever. Fine if they don't like what you've made, because it's a creative endeavor and not everyone's going to like what you've made. But yeah, it's tough. You know, it's hard to read stuff about yourself, and the temptation is high. You know, it really is. But I wanted to just raise something really positive. One of the gifts of the show and taking part in it is you get a good 10 to 15 minutes of judgment on every single garment. So for me, I made 30, and 30 times what I made was critiqued. And obviously they know their stuff, and they explain to you bits of the garment and how you could have made it a bit better. They were never cruel. I never found them cruel. They were very direct, but never cruel. And I remember that was such a gift, you know, that we couldn't pay for, you know, so I'm very grateful for that bit. And so if that's your motivation to go on the Sewing Bee, then that's a good one to go for.
Yeah. Free advice. That's what you're saying. Go on and get free advice.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you get all your fabric paid for, that we found out.
Yes.
Yeah, you do.
We didn't know that. So the dress that you have behind you, Deborah, is that one that is that for a class, or is that for you, or?
Oh, do you know, I've been making samples for classes for weeks, and I wanted to make something for me. So it's got all octopus on it, and I've been reading an amazing book by Erica Davis. She's a style editor, and was for years. And she really promotes pattern clashing. So I'm trying to dip my toe into that. So I've got cerise and like this, you know, proper 80s electric blue and cerise. But I've started putting some white and cerise stripes on it as well, like a chevron. So I'm really trying. And because that's the best thing about the internet. We talked about the negative things, but you do get constantly inspired by different creatives, and we're always learning in this hobby and this work, aren't we? And I love it. I could literally, on my day off, I'm sewing as well.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think sadly this is about the end of the Sewing Bee Natters. It's been an absolute and utter pleasure, John. You've joined us twice. Thank you so much. Your opinions haven't really changed from the beginning. We should have put who we thought were going to win at the very beginning as well.
Oh yeah, but I think we'd all got it right anyway.
Yes, we did. Yeah. Yes, we did really well. Should we take that as a tick? We don't know when. I presume the next season's going to be commissioned, because they were advertising for it. So we're looking to a season 11. Who will be the judges? Who will be the presenter? If anybody wants Patrick and they live in the northeast, I'm quite happy for you to join him, because he's going to get folded up and back inside my wardrobe for another goodness knows how long. He folds up. He's fallen over and all sorts, John. He's been very naughty. I've had some very funny messages about Patrick, I tell you.
Hey John, she's got Rick Astley and Right Said Fred in the other wardrobe and all.
Nice.
It's a joke. Anyway, thank you again, Deborah, for spending time on a Saturday afternoon. Thank you, John, because I know you rushed home from work this afternoon. Thank you so much for your time.
And changed my shirt.
I know, I noticed. was watching. You were Christmas this
At
morning.
Christmas
That's
this
why.
morning. Yeah.
What would have been in chaos? John's been on TV this morning, Deborah, and he was doing a Christmas event. So that would have really thrown us all.
Yeah, exactly.
And Alistair, thank you. You're just brilliant in everything that you do and all of your tips. So what we will be doing is, if anybody's watching this, if you like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, then when the next videos are released, then you will be first to hear about them. And thank you so much, everybody, for your time.
And just remember that we've got a £80 hamper from House of Alistair. So the giveaway
So
has
no competition.
no competition. So the giveaway, please still write your comments and tell us what you want us to come up with and see. And if there's people you want to know a little bit more about, we can do interviews and things like that, get all the old crowd back. But thank you so much, John, for both of your episodes and your very generous time. And it was lovely to meet you, Deborah. I'm sure this isn't going to be the last time that we speak and have some fun. And thank you, Kim, as well.
Thank you.
So see you next season.
See you next
Wave, Deborah, wave.